When I first started working at the company, I never imagined things would turn out the way they did. I was just a fresh-faced assistant, newly graduated from college, eager to begin my first real job. The office was a massive space, filled with a flurry of activity. People moved quickly between desks, immersed in their work, and the atmosphere felt polished, sophisticated, and very professional. My boss, Miss Veronica, was the senior manager, and the office buzzed with admiration for her. She was the kind of person who could effortlessly take charge, organizing the team, making quick, confident decisions, and handling challenges as if they were nothing at all. To be honest, I was intimidated when I first met her. Miss Veronica was much older than me, seasoned, confident, and incredibly focused. There was an undeniable aura around her that commanded attention the moment she entered the room. Her presence was almost magnetic, as if there were an invisible force field that drew everyone's gaze. And she never needed to raise her voice to make herself heard. Despite her calm demeanor, there was an air of authority that radiated from her, a quiet power that was impossible to ignore. First, I had no idea what to expect from her. She wasn't the warm, approachable type like some bosses. Instead, she exuded a seriousness that was tempered by fairness. I quickly learned that she didn't waste time with unnecessary pleasantries. If there was a task at hand, she made sure it was completed flawlessly and on schedule. Her efficiency was astonishing. It was clear that she was a true expert in her field, and I couldn't help but admire her ability to keep everything running smoothly. As time went on, I began to notice the little things that set Miss Veronica apart. Her perfectly tailored outfits always looked impeccable. Her hairstyle was neat and precise, and there was something about the way she carried herself, graceful, deliberate, and dignified, that made her seem untouchable. Despite my natural shyness, I found myself drawn to her. I admired her strength, her poise, and the way she seemed to have everything under control. I would often find myself quietly observing her, stealing glances when I thought she wasn't looking. Deep down, I longed to be more like her, confident, powerful, and composed, but I kept those thoughts to myself, unsure of how to voice them. Yet, despite my awe and respect for her, Miss Veronica always treated me with kindness. She would call me into her office from time to time, not to issue commands, but to check in on how I was doing. First, I assumed it was just a routine checkup, but after a few conversations, I realized that she genuinely cared about how I was adjusting to the demands of the job. This simple gesture made me feel seen and appreciated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Every time I left her office, I found myself in a swirl of emotions. On one hand, I was grateful for the attention, but on the other, there was something else, something deeper, that I couldn't quite put into words. It was as if her every word, every glance, carried an unspoken message. In those moments, I didn't yet understand it, but looking back, I now recognize that these small interactions marked the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. First, everything felt normal. I was just an assistant, learning the ropes, absorbing everything I could, and doing my best to contribute. But as the days went by, I started to realize that my feelings for Miss Veronica were more complicated than I had originally thought. One afternoon, while I was diligently working at my desk, I received a message. Miss Veronica wanted to see me. My heart skipped a beat. I had no idea what the meeting was about, but I tried to calm my racing thoughts and focus on staying composed. I stood up, straightened my blouse, and walked to her office, my palms slick with nervous sweat. I quickly wiped them on my pants before knocking gently on the door. "Come in," she called from the other side. I opened the door slowly and stepped inside, trying to project confidence even though my nerves were getting the best of me. She was sitting behind her desk, as always, radiating professionalism. She was deep in thought, scanning a pile of papers in front of her. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was just a routine check-in, but when she looked up, her eyes met mine, and she gave me a smile that made my heart race. It wasn't just any smile. It was warm and inviting, and in that moment, I felt a wave of nervous excitement flood through me. I took a deep breath to steady myself, trying to act normal despite the flutter in my chest. "Come in. Sit down," she said, her voice calm but with a softness that I hadn't heard from her before. She gestured to the chair across from her. I walked over, my legs a little shaky, but I did my best to keep it together as I sat down. "So, how's everything going with the project?" she asked, her sharp eyes studying me carefully. "Is there anything you need help with?" I opened my mouth to respond, and suddenly, the words just started pouring out. We discussed the work for a while, me explaining my progress and asking for advice on a few tasks I was struggling with. She listened intently, nodding thoughtfully and offering suggestions that helped me gain clarity. It felt natural, even pleasant, normal, in fact. But then, something shifted. There was a subtle change in the way she was looking at me, something that wasn't purely professional anymore. Her gaze seemed to hold a depth I hadn't noticed before, and it made my heart race even faster. I couldn't quite place it, but there was something in the air that made everything feel charged. I tried to stay focused on the conversation, but my mind kept drifting back to the way she was looking at me. She paused for a moment, not saying anything, but her intense gaze remained fixed on me. I felt a rush of warmth spread across my face, and my breath caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what to make of the silence, but when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual, almost gentle. "You know," she said, her tone shifting, "I've been paying attention to your work lately, and I have to say, you're doing great. You're sharp, diligent, and you have something that stands out." Her words took me by surprise. It wasn't just praise for my work. It felt like something more personal, something deeper. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Was she complimenting me for my work, or was there something more? I couldn't tell, but her words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. I sat there, unsure of what to say next, feeling both flattered and a little confused. I didn't know if I was supposed to simply thank her and leave, or if there was something more I was supposed to understand. In that moment, I realized that Miss Veronica was seeing something in me that I hadn't fully noticed myself. It wasn't just my abilities as an assistant that she was acknowledging. There was something more. I swallowed hard before managing to say, "Thank you, Miss Veronica. I really appreciate that." My voice was shaky, but I was grateful for her words, even if they left me wondering about the connection we shared. She smiled again, a soft, almost knowing smile that seemed to convey more than just a polite gesture. It was the kind of smile that made my heart race a little faster, as if there was something deeper behind it. "You're welcome," she said, her voice calm but with an underlying warmth. "I just wanted you to know that I see your potential. Keep it up." I left her office feeling a swirl of emotions that I hadn't anticipated. What I had expected to be a routine check-in turned out to be something completely different. Her words echoed in my head as I made my way back to my desk, each step feeling heavier with the weight of her compliment. "You stand out," she had said. But what did she really mean by that? Why had she phrased it in such a way? Almost like there was an unspoken message behind it? And why did it feel like she was saying something more than just a compliment about my work? A slight blush crept up on my face as I tried to process everything she had said. I had always admired her. She was my boss, someone I looked up to, and now she was praising me in a way that made me feel special. Her words weren't just about my work ethic, or even about my performance. There was something personal in them. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though it trembled ever so slightly. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine, a gaze so intense it made my stomach tighten. There was something magnetic in her expression, something that made me feel both uncomfortable and intrigued, but not in a bad way. For a moment, I was frozen, unsure of how to react. "You're a very attractive woman. You know that," she said, her voice low but confident, carrying a weight that I couldn't ignore. The way she spoke was different. There was no casualness in her tone, no flippant remark like I was used to hearing from friends or colleagues. It was direct, almost like she saw something in me that I hadn't even recognized myself. For a second, I couldn't find my voice, and my mind went blank. A rush of heat surged to my cheeks as my heart started racing again. But I was still unsure of how to respond. I had heard compliments before, but this was different. The way she looked at me, the way her words lingered in the air, it felt intimate, almost like she was saying more than just a simple observation. And coming from her, someone I had always respected, someone I admired, it made everything feel even more intense. I had no idea how to handle the situation. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of her words, her gaze, and the shift in the atmosphere. I just sat there, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to calm my racing heart. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice wavering slightly. I hoped I didn't sound too flustered, but I couldn't help it. I was caught off guard, and it was impossible to hide the effect she had on me. She smiled, but this time it wasn't the usual warm, friendly smile I had grown accustomed to. No, this was deeper, more knowing, almost like she had just shared a secret with me. There was something mysterious in her expression that made my heart flutter in ways I couldn't explain. "I'm being honest with you," she continued, her tone softer now, but still unwavering. "You're beautiful, and I can't help but notice how well we get along. You're smart, and I admire you." Her words hung in the air, each one feeling more meaningful than the last. It wasn't just a compliment about my looks or my work. It was something personal, something that made me feel seen in a way I had never felt before. My heart raced again, and I could feel warmth spread through my chest, almost like her words were a balm to something I didn't even know was hurting. I had never been admired like this before, especially not by someone in such a powerful position. The sincerity in her words was overwhelming, and it left me breathless. I could feel my face flush even more, and I quickly lowered my gaze, not knowing how to handle the intensity of the moment. The connection between us felt different now, more than just a boss and an employee. Felt like something else, something deeper, more meaningful. I had always admired her, but now, as she looked at me with such intensity, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something between us, something unspoken. But before I could gather my thoughts, she leaned back in her chair, still watching me with those piercing eyes, as if she were waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to understand. Her words weren't just casual praise anymore. They felt like an invitation, an opening into something more personal, more intimate. "You're not just good at your job, you know," she added, her voice softer, almost reassuring. "There's more to you than that. I've noticed the way you carry yourself, the way you think, and I admire that too." Her words settled over me like a comforting embrace, but there was also a tinge of something unsettling in them. What did she mean by more to you than that? Was she talking about my personality, my looks, or something else entirely? I didn't know, and it left me in a daze. All I could do was nod, my mind racing as I tried to piece together what she was saying. Over the next few days, things between us began to shift in unexpected ways. I learned that Miss Veronica wasn't what I had originally thought. She was someone who loved women, and she had no interest in men at all. I hadn't known this about her before, but it didn't change how I felt. I respected her choice, and I was determined to treat her with the same professionalism I always had. Her personal life was her business, and it wasn't my place to judge. To my surprise, she started finding more reasons to spend time with me. What began as brief chats during meetings gradually grew into us having lunch together almost every day. First, I was hesitant, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic, but as the days passed, it started to feel natural. Our conversations evolved from work-related topics to more personal subjects, family, dreams, past experiences, struggles, and everything in between. Miss Veronica began opening up to me in ways I hadn't expected. She shared stories from her life, the challenges she had faced, and the wisdom she had gained along the way. I listened intently, captivated by her strength and vulnerability. In return, I found myself sharing things about myself that I had never told anyone else, memories from my childhood, fears about my future, doubts I had about my career. Felt good to be understood, to talk to someone who truly listened. The connection between us deepened each day. almost as if we were forming a bond that was stronger than a typical boss-employee relationship. It felt real, genuine, and heartfelt. I began to notice small things, like how she remembered the little details about me, or how she would ask about my family and friends. It made me feel special, valued, and truly seen. Despite the unusual nature of our growing relationship, I couldn't help but feel drawn to her. Every time we spent time together, it felt like there was something more than just conversation at play. There was a magnetic pull, something unspoken that kept me coming back for more. Each time she smiled at me or laughed at one of my stories, my heart would flutter, a mix of emotions I hadn't experienced before: excitement, comfort, and an inexplicable sense of connection. One day, as we sat together during lunch, she looked at me with those piercing blue eyes, her expression serious yet gentle. "You know," she said softly, her voice almost hesitant, "spending time with you has been the highlight of my day. I really value our conversations. It's like I can be my true self around you." I blinked, surprised by her honesty. Her words struck a chord within me, and I realized how much they meant. It was comforting to know that someone else felt the same way I did. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly understood. I managed to smile, attempting to keep my voice steady, though my emotions were anything but calm. "I feel the same way," I admitted, my voice quieter than usual, as though the weight of the words required more effort to speak. "It's nice to talk to someone who truly gets me." The simplicity of that sentiment felt like it bridged a gap I hadn't even realized existed. I wasn't just speaking from the surface, but from a place deep within me that welcomed the connection we were building. She nodded as though she understood exactly what I meant, and we both turned back to our meal, a comfortable silence settling between us. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet that speaks volumes, filled with shared understanding. As we ate, the conversation continued to flow effortlessly, like we had known each other for years instead of just a short time. It was in those moments, between the small talks and pauses, that an unspoken bond began to grow between us, one that felt more solid, more real than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just a friendship, it was something deeper, something that wasn't easily defined. Over the next few weeks, that connection blossomed, becoming something that felt as natural as breathing. Our conversations moved from the superficial to the profoundly personal. We found ourselves discussing topics we hadn't even realized were important: our dreams, our fears, our beliefs about love, relationships, and the kind of people we wanted to become. It was like peeling away layers of ourselves, one revealing after another, until what was left was something raw and honest. Every conversation left me feeling more seen, more understood, and that in itself was intoxicating. It was an intimacy that didn't require physical touch, but rather the shared vulnerability of our words. I started to see Miss Veronica not just as my boss, but as someone I genuinely admired. She was intelligent, compassionate, and had a way of seeing the world that I found both comforting and inspiring. I cared about her more deeply than I had anticipated, but I didn't know what that meant for us. I was unsure if it was just friendship, or if there was something more there. But whatever it was, felt right. There were moments, fleeting and sharp, when I caught myself wishing it could be more than just a platonic bond. But I quickly suppressed those thoughts, reminding myself that what we had was special in its own unique way. Still, there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that wouldn't go away. What if she saw me the same way? What if she felt the same attraction, the same pull? I couldn't be sure, and so I buried those feelings. Unsure of how to proceed, I continued to focus on the connection we were building, enjoying the relationship for what it was, while cautiously guarding my emotions. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months. Every moment I spent with Miss Veronica felt like a gift, a small piece of peace in a world that often felt chaotic. Our bond grew stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. I found myself anticipating our next conversation, our next lunch, our next heart-to-heart discussion. It wasn't just about the time we spent together. It was the emotional comfort that came with it. It grounded me, especially on days when work was stressful and overwhelming. What we were building was rare, something I didn't want to take for granted. And so, I embraced it wholeheartedly, taking things one day at a time, letting whatever was meant to be unfold naturally between us. Then one evening after work, she invited me out for a drink. First, I hesitated. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Was this a good idea? Was it crossing a line? But there was something about her, something that made me want to be with her, to see where this might go. In the end, curiosity and the desire to be close to her won out, and I agreed. We sat at a quiet bar, away from the bustle of the world, sipping our drinks as we chatted. The atmosphere was relaxed, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could truly be myself around her. There were no expectations, no pressure, just two women sharing an evening, talking about life and everything in between. But then, without warning, she reached across the table and touched my hand. The world seemed to pause for a moment. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze. Her touch was soft, yet there was an undeniable intensity behind it. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, everything else around us faded away. I couldn't think, couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I have to be honest with you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the bar. "I'm not just interested in you as a colleague. I'm attracted to you, and I think you feel the same way." I pulled my hand back instinctively, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was a swirl of confusion. Was she saying what I thought she was saying? Had she just confessed she felt something for me? Something more than professional? My thoughts were a tangled mess, and I wasn't sure how to respond. "Miss Veronica, I don't know what to say," I said, my voice shaky. "I didn't expect this." She gave me a small, understanding smile, though there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I understand. It's not easy, and I didn't want to make things complicated, but I can't ignore this connection we have." I sat there, still processing her words, trying to figure out what this meant. It was so personal, so raw, and yet, as much as I was confused, a part of me knew that there was something undeniable between us. I didn't have all the answers, but I couldn't ignore the way my heart was pulling me toward her. "I don't know what this means." I finally found my voice, "but I'm willing to see where this goes. I trust you." The smile she gave me was like a weight lifting from my chest. It was a relief, but also the beginning of something new, something uncharted. There were still so many questions. What would happen next? How would this affect our working relationship? But for the moment, I was willing to embrace the unknown. I trusted her, and I trusted what we had. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic between us shifted and evolved. We became closer, spending more time together outside of work. There was never any pressure. She was always respectful of my boundaries, never pushing me to go further than I was comfortable with. And yet, the chemistry between us continued to grow stronger, undeniable in its presence. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, she asked me to come over to her apartment. First, I hesitated. The uncertainty, the fear of misreading the situation, lingered in my mind, but deep down, I knew that something was pushing me forward, urging me to take that next step. With a breath, I agreed. When I arrived, she greeted me with a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. Her presence had a calming effect on me, and as I stepped inside, I felt a sense of comfort that I hadn't expected. We sat down on the couch, and the conversation flowed easily at first, filled with light-hearted laughter and casual chatter. But as the evening wore on, something changed. The air between us shifted. There was a new tension, a weight to every word. Every glance felt charged, every smile layered with meaning. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel it in the very space between us. Finally, she turned to me, her gaze intense and searching. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice quiet, yet steady. It was a question that held more than just the moment. It was a question about everything that had been building between us. I could feel my chest tighten, the tension palpable. Was I sure? Could I take that leap? "Yes," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. I think I am. The words escaped my lips before I could even process them. But in that moment, a deep certainty washed over me. I knew that I meant every word. It was as if something had shifted between us, something palpable, something undeniable. I could feel the electricity in the air, the tension, but also the connection that was growing stronger with every second. I wanted to see where this would lead, to explore the depth of what was beginning to unfold between us. My heart pounded in my chest as I gazed into her eyes, a look of both uncertainty and hope in mine. I couldn't predict what would happen next, but I trusted my instincts. I trusted that whatever this was, it was real, and that certainty, despite the nervousness swirling in the pit of my stomach, was all I needed. Her lips curved into a gentle smile, one that held a mix of understanding and relief. It was then that I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. A vulnerability, raw and unguarded, that made my chest tighten. It was as though all the walls we had carefully built around ourselves, all the barriers we had set up for protection, were slowly beginning to crumble. Piece by piece, the tension still lingered, suspended in the air like a delicate thread, but it no longer felt cold or distant. Instead, it was soft, intimate, like a shared secret unfolding in the quiet of that moment. We sat there, silent, each of us absorbing the weight of what had just been said, the space between us now charged with something new. Time seemed to stretch and bend in that silence, but I couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. What thoughts were playing out behind that calm demeanor? What was she feeling? And yet, as if reading my mind, she reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. In that simple, soft touch, all the questions and doubts that had been racing through my mind faded into nothing. Her touch, warm and reassuring, seemed to speak volumes, and in that instant, I felt an unspoken understanding pass between us. Then, she reached out to caress my face, and for the first time, I didn't flinch or pull away. I didn't even question it. It was as if everything had aligned in that moment. Our lips met in a tender kiss, and it was as though the world had stopped spinning for a fraction of a second. I could feel the spark between us, igniting something that had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a revelation, a turning point that changed everything. From that moment forward, we were no longer just boss and assistant. We were two women who had uncovered something deeper, something more profound, something that transcended the boundaries of the roles we had played in each other's lives. Our relationship continued to grow, delicately balancing between the professional world we inhabited and the deep, uncharted connection we were exploring. First, felt like walking a tightrope, always conscious of the fine line between what was appropriate and what we both felt. Every glance, every touch seemed to carry the weight of the world. We couldn't help but wonder what others might think, whether this bond would be accepted, or if it would shatter under the scrutiny of those around us. It was a constant struggle to balance the tension between our personal feelings and the expectations that weighed heavily on us. There were moments when I questioned everything. Was it worth the risk? What if this turned out to be nothing more than a fleeting connection? What if it all came crashing down around us, destroying the fragile bond we had built? Doubts would sneak in, quietly whispering in the back of my mind. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, I always found my way back to her. Whether it was a stolen glance across the room or a quiet conversation shared over lunch, those moments kept drawing us together. Our connection held firm, even amidst the chaos of our professional lives. And despite the ever-present pressure of societal expectations, we found ways to be true to ourselves, to each other, and to the love we were building. As time went on, I began to realize that what we had was something extraordinary. It wasn't just a passing attraction or a temporary infatuation. It was real, something that ran much deeper than I had ever anticipated. This wasn't just love. It was something that defied the rules, something that existed outside the confines of societal norms. In a place where love was supposed to be impossible, we had created something uniquely our own, something that was pure and untainted by judgment. But even as I felt this certainty growing within me, the weight of the world's expectations lingered in the background. What would people say if they knew? How would they react? Would we be able to handle the fallout? If there was any, these thoughts continued to plague me. But in the quiet corners of my mind, there was a growing sense of peace. The love between us had become something natural, something inevitable, something that had started without warning, and yet now felt like the most authentic part of my life. It wasn't something I could ignore, nor did I want to. The future was a mystery, and I had no idea where this journey would lead. But one thing was certain. I was ready to face it, ready to embrace the uncertainty, knowing that whatever came our way, we would face it together. The love we shared had already proven to be worth every challenge, every moment of doubt, every risk we had taken. It was something real, something I couldn't walk away from, no matter what obstacles we would face. I had found something worth fighting for, and I was prepared to continue this journey with her, wherever it would take us. Then, one day, she invited me over. She told me to come prepared for something unexpected, though I had no idea what she meant. I arrived at her house, expecting the usual, a quiet conversation, few laughs, and maybe some simple moments of connection. But as soon as I stepped inside, I could feel that something was different. The air was heavier, charged with an intensity that had been absent before. She looked at me with a calm but knowing expression, her eyes soft but carrying an unmistakable intensity. It was as though she was holding back something she knew but wasn't saying. Without a word, she reached out, taking my hand in hers. There was something purposeful in her touch, a deliberate, almost magnetic pull that sent a shiver down my spine. Slowly, she led me toward the bedroom. My heart began to race in my chest, each step echoing in the quiet house. Part of me felt nervous, unsure of what was happening, while another part of me felt a deep, growing curiosity. What was she planning? What was happening between us? As we walked down the hallway, I could hear the sound of our footsteps, slow and measured, almost as if time itself had begun to slow. My heart beat faster with each step, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and excitement. When we finally reached the bedroom, the door creaked open, and she gently tugged me inside. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of a lamp casting shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I stood there for a moment, frozen, not knowing what to do next. Everything felt surreal, like I was on the precipice of something significant but unsure of what that something was. She turned to face me, her eyes never leaving mine. Then, in a movement that took me completely by surprise, she did something that left me breathless, stunned. It was something I hadn't expected, something that left my heart racing and my thoughts scattered. There was an intensity in her gaze, a fire in her eyes that made everything else fade away. Time seemed to stop, and all I could focus on was her eyes, her touch. She didn't say a word, but in that silence, everything was said. Her touch was soft yet electrifying, a spark that sent waves of emotion crashing through me. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced, and before my mind could catch up, my body had already reacted, flooded with sensations that were both confusing and thrilling. The confusion only grew stronger as I stood there, trying to process what had just happened. My emotions were a whirlwind, a mixture of surprise, desire, and something deeper, something powerful. I felt like I was being swept away by a force that I couldn't understand, but I didn't want to escape it. In that moment, nothing else mattered except for the connection between us, raw, untamed, and utterly consuming. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos. If you find the content useful and interesting, don't forget to like, share, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update attractive, inspiring, and useful content for you. Click the bell icon to receive notifications as soon as there are new videos. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue to develop. Thank you and see you in the next videos.